You are listening to the FORSCOM Frontline, bringing you to our soldiers on the front lines of readiness.
Hey everyone, and welcome to the FORSCOM Frontline. I'm Jeannie, and I'm your host. Today, I am joined by Franz Ammann, the Chemical, Biological, Radiological, Nuclear Explosives, or CBRNE, Analytical and Remediation Activity, or CARA, Director and Pilot Christopher Hurst. Welcome, and thank you for taking the time to talk with me today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So let's just start out kind of, I know I said a bunch of words that my audience is probably like, Jeannie, what did you just say? So before we dive into what CBRNE is and what CARA is and everything, tell me a little bit about yourselves, like who you are, what do you do, how did you get to where you are, that kind of thing. Where you're from. Franz, you want to go first?
I guess I'll kick it off. I've been the director for CARA. Our acronym is called. It's less of a mouthful than speaking it all at one time. But I've been here since 2019. I'm a retired colonel in the Army with a CBRNE background, CBRN background. Before CARA stood up, CARA used to be under the 22nd Chemical Battalion, and I had commanded that when I was a battalion commander. So I have a long line or time with the organization in uniform, and now have the honor and privilege of being the director of the all-civilian organization.
Awesome. And where are you from originally?
So I'm actually a naturalized citizen. I came from Switzerland, but I grew up in South Carolina.
Very good. So, because I said Franz, I asked him what his name was ahead of time because I wasn't sure. And he says, Franz. And I said, can I say it in a German accent? He was like, sure. But guess what? I can't do a German accent. So, joke's on you.
I can do it in a southern drawl now. That's mine, not the German accent.
That's me. I'm from North Carolina. I got a southern accent. I just don't pull it out for y'all. And next up, we have Christopher Hurst, or Chris. You want to tell me a little about yourself?
From Ohio, but live in North Carolina. I have a residence in North Carolina.
Woo woo.
Joined the Army in 1984 at the age of 17 and stayed in until I was retired in 2016 after 32 years active duty. I've been with CARA for 4 years now as a flight operations and safety officer. Flying the mission, and started off in the Army as a UH-60 mechanic, and then went to flight school in 1990, and I've been flying since 1990 with either with the Army or for the Army. Even after retirement, I've always still flown for the Army, either in a contractor role or a Department of Army civilian role.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys both for your service. I appreciate it. And that you still continue to serve with CARA. So let's get into what is CARA? Like, I mean, I said all of those words: chemical, biological, radiological, nuclear, explosives. So that's CBRNE. That's what we were talking about there. And then analytical and remediation activity. Those are a lot of words that this girl does not understand. Can you explain it to me?
Yeah, so CARA, as I said, is our acronym. It is a all-civilian organization, and we have a laboratory capability that provides theater validation for combatant commands when deployed, and we also support cleanup of formerly used defense sites. We were working out of Redstone. We've worked here at APG. We've worked at down in Alabama for, excuse me, I have to think of it, down near Fort McClellan and other sites, Rocky Mountain areas, where there were old stockpiles or testing of chemical munitions. So we support the cleanup and safe disposal and assessment of identified chemical munitions.
Okay, so you said a bunch of different locations of where you guys are located. I heard APG in there, McClellan, Rocky Mount, and whatnot. Where is CARA like headquartered specifically? Because I know Chris said earlier that he has a residence in North Carolina. So do you live in North Carolina and go somewhere else, or are you guys located here in North Carolina? I'm a little confused.
So the locations I was talking about mentioned earlier, were the formerly used defense sites that we've helped support for remediation. CARA is located at 2 different locations, primarily at Aberdeen Proving Ground on the Edgewood side. We have 3 sections here, including the headquarters, and then we have a section down at Redstone Arsenal that was previously located at Pine Bluff Arsenal before they completed their mission there.
Okay. And Chris, how does that work for you? Because like I mentioned, you said you had a residence in North Carolina. So do you work out of APG?
I do.
Or?
I retired out of North Carolina. I work up here at Aberdeen Proving Ground, and I just commute home for the weekends.
Okay.
So my family's still in North Carolina.
Okay. So when you say you commute, are you flying home or are you driving home?
I'm driving the I-95 Express.
Oh, that's got to be brutal every weekend. But I'm sure your family appreciates it. But if I could fly, I'd probably fly all the time. So that's just me.
It would be nice.
So, because I kind of told you guys ahead of time, I don't really know what CARA is, and CBRNE is kind of one of those units that you don't hear a lot about of, because I know you guys have like a bunch of EOD guys in there. I used to work on the special operations side, and I'd work with like a handful of EOD guys. They were our recruiters. I was on the recruiting side, and so that's one thing that they don't talk about a lot. And I feel like CBRNE is kind of the same thing. So kind of what makes CARA so special in the CBRNE world, or just in the Army in general? Because you guys seem kind of like, I'd never heard of you before. So what makes you so special?
So CARA is as we mentioned, a all civilian organization. So in FORSCOM, that is not the common, is primarily uniform versus all civilian. But I would say 90+% of our personnel were prior service, either in the capacity as Chris was as a pilot, or part EOD, as you mentioned, we call them explosive safety specialists, UXOs. And then we have chemical soldiers, the 74 series, which are the chemical engineer technicians within the civilian world. We also have a section, as I mentioned earlier, laboratory, which is expeditionary capability, capable to support combatant commands or joint forces commands to provide level 3 theater validation of any use of chemical, biological agents and identify explosives. So they have a full contingent of scientific laboratory capabilities, and the laboratory themselves is manned by all civilians. They have degrees from bachelor's degrees to PhDs. They worked with NATO. They've worked with other organizations before coming here. So we have a very diverse chemist and microbiologist specialist. And we also are able to do near real-time air monitoring. So if we have to go downrange to make sure the area is clear, people can breathe the air, there's no chemical hazards, we're able to do that as well. But second mission that we have, and this is where Chris falls into, is our technical escort of chemical warfare material. That is we're the only one in DoD authorized to move surety material that falls under AR-50-6 that is either tested or recovered, and you have to be in the PRP, the Personal Reliability Program, to be able to do that particular mission. So all of our CETs and ESSs, the chemical specialists and the UXOs, they all must meet the stringent requirements for PRP. And then we also support the recovered chemical weapons directed RCMD So if there's any chemical rounds or munitions or suspect chemical munitions that are recovered throughout the state, our team would go out and help assess that the suspect munitions. They would non-intrusively, through X-rays and other means, determine if the round is actually filled with chemicals, and then we are able to package and move them to a safe location for future destruction.
Oh, wow. Okay. And because CARA is all civilians, you said you're all prior military. Now, is this like just a federal GS position that anybody can apply for as long as they have the qualifications?
Yes, we quite often have job announcements out for our CETs or I should say chemical engineer technicians and our explosive safety specialists on USA Jobs. They're out there on a regular basis. I will say one of the good things for CARA, we don't have a high turnover rate, but we always have openings here and there. Same with our pilots. We have some rotations. We do have competition with the private sector to draw in our highly qualified pilots, which Chris can talk about a little bit more. But yes, we do put our job announcements out on USA Jobs, and they're all GS.
Okay. So I'm going to kind of switch to you, Chris, because we were talking about, the jobs and stuff like that. And so you're a pilot, and you were a pilot in the Army.
Was.
Okay.
So
what drew you to CARA, though, like after you retired?
Civil service, for one.
Okay. That's fair.
Being able to keep supporting. Well, I mean, like I said, I retired in 2016, and I had a civil service job at a different location, and I wasn't very happy with that job, and just started looking around. And for my goal was to continue serving the warfighter, and I'm able to do that in this role. I had a short stint as a contractor, although still working for the Army as a contractor. Wasn't very happy with that, and there's better camaraderie here and a more direct link with the soldier than you get as a contractor, and that's what brought me to this job. And the perk to this job is a dual rating requirement, meaning that we all fly fixed wing aircraft and rotary wing aircraft at the same time, and it's very common to get out of one airframe and immediately step into the other airframe. So you're going from an airplane to a helicopter in a matter of minutes as we're moving this material either interstate or intrastate, depending on where it needs to go and where we're picking it up from.
Okay, so let me ask, and I ask this because my son is actually in college to become a fixed wing pilot. He's a commercial aviation major. Hopefully will graduate soon. He has his PPL. He has his commercial license. He's just kind of finishing up his hours and stuff. How easy is it to learn like the fixed wing to the rotary wing? Like, or how interchangeable is that? And where did you get your skill to do that? Because that's amazing that you can fly both a plane and a helicopter.
So most of us, the general path is we're all graduates of the current pilots that are assigned to CARA are all graduates of Fort Novacell's initial entry rotary program, helicopters. And then at some point in our stage and career, you learn to fly an airplane. You apply for the fixed wing aircraft qualification course, either through a unit or as a deal to take another duty station. However you get there, that's how most of us have arrived at the fixed wing training course. Moving from one to another, it's really not all that hard. To be honest with you, the helicopter, in my opinion, is harder to fly than the airplane.
Okay.
But the rules and regulations and the FAA airspace is more complicated when flying an airplane versus a helicopter. So I don't know if that makes sense. So
it does.
But mechanically, the helicopter's
a
little bit harder to fly.
Well, a helicopter is a lot smaller than an airplane, so I can understand the airspace thing.
That is true.
Okay.
But the airplane, we're flying at much higher altitudes. We're up there, generally in the same airspace as commercial airliners, whereas the helicopter, we're not. So it's a lot, rule-wise, it's a lot easier to fly the helicopter than it is the airplane. It just gets a little more complicated when you get into complicated airspace. But But again, most of us, we were all initial entry rotor wing first, and then at some point in our careers, we have one pilot that immediately started flying airplanes right after his graduation at Fort Novosel, where I was already at CW4 with 24 years in the Army before I went to the fixed wing program.
Okay.
So it just varies.
So you talk about the schooling at Fort Novosel. Now, is that something that you do before you become a CARA pilot? Is that like a requirement to apply, or is it something that you're kind of a pilot? Either can you be a fixed wing pilot and apply to be a CARA and then do helicopter training, or do you have to be a helicopter pilot to apply for CARA and then go to school? Like, how does that whole process work?
There are challenges with this, and it has created some hiring challenges. You don't have to be a fixed wing pilot a high time. We have the ability to send somebody to the fixed wing qualification course. We don't have that mechanism within the Army to take an airplane pilot and make them a helicopter pilot.
Okay.
The Army rules don't allow for that. So if we can find a military helicopter pilot, or a pilot with enough time in the airframe that we fly that can do a military conversion, then we may have the option to send to the fixed wing program. But the long pole in this tent is finding a military helicopter, or somebody that we can do as a substitution waiver for, to say that they flew this, can we get a waiver for them to fly ours? And if we can do that, it's possible to do it. But generally speaking, the other limitation for a job like this is the amount of flight time that you need to get here. Generally over 1,000 hours of piloting command time. That's hard to get as just a civilian pilot. You mentioned your son with a PPL. For him to pay for $1,000 flight hours out of his pocket,
It's a lot.
that's a long time. And when he gets to that point, the airlines may be looking at him already. So
Right.
it's hard to bring somebody into a military environment from the civilian side, that, especially with the pay scales that are being offered sometimes on the civilian side. I enjoy the military side. It's a different structure from the civilian community, and I enjoy this structure much better.
Okay, so more often than not, it is a veteran pilot that comes in to be a CARA pilot.
Almost 90% of our applicants that we see come across the USA jobs are prior military, either, doesn't matter what branch, but are prior military aviators.
Okay, awesome. That's really cool. I mean, he's talking about going into the Navy because he wants to fly fighter jets after he graduates, but we'll see if that actually happens.
Well, good luck with that.
I know, right? I just want him to finish college at this point.
Yeah.
Flying is expensive. I know.
All branches are hurting for pilots.
Absolutely. And flying is expensive, as you mentioned, to pay for 1,000 hours. Audience, it's expensive to become a pilot. That's all I'm going to say. I'm broke. Send help. No, I'm just kidding. We're good.
Yes.
But yeah, so that's really exciting. And I mean, I'm not going to get into further details of like, oh, what should you do here? Just know that if you are a veteran pilot, no matter the branch, you can apply to be a CARA pilot, and they will help you once you get there to get your fixed wing certifications, right?
It's great. And we also, other additional requirements are FAA requirements. We still hold FAA certificates at a commercial pilot or greater, airline transport pilot, instrument ratings. And although aircraft type ratings are not required for this type of job, we can handle that in-house. A type rating in the airframes that we fly it's preferable, but some of those are hard to get without being in this unit due to the nature of the aircraft we fly.
Absolutely.
Or the type of aircraft we fly.
Now, what is, I guess, how should I ask this? What is your favorite thing about being a CARA pilot? Like, is it different than when you were in the Army and flying? I'm just trying to say, like, do you love it?
Well, I do love it, and that's why I'm here. like Mr. Rahman said earlier, the airlines are trying to pull people, and we're in that experience level. We can all walk right into an airline position tomorrow, but we do this because we like it. And what makes this flying better than flying it when I was on active duty is I don't have to. I can. It's a normal duty day. We come in, we plan, we fly our mission, we land, we AAR, and we talk about it. And if there's any bit of the duty day left, we enjoy the rest of the day, catching up on work. Whereas with the Army, I'm not getting up at 4 a.m. to drive an hour for physical fitness, caught up in staff meetings. We do have the meetings, but it's that active duty soldier role is out of this to some degree, where we can just focus on the mission. We don't have some of the ankle biters that soldiers go through. I remember my last few years as an aviator in the Army, flying was not my priority. It was like number 8 down the list.
Oh, wow.
And that's okay. I mean, you can't get around that. That's part of being a soldier, which I enjoyed. But some of that is removed here as a civilian.
Okay. And so speaking of like missions, what kind of missions does CARA do? I mean, we talk a lot about the chemical, the explosives, the biological and stuff. So I'm sure you guys do lots of different things. Can you give any examples of like what you guys do on a regular basis?
On a normal basis, we mission related. We do fly cross country. We have flown missions in one day all the way out to JBLM. Down to Anniston, Alabama. We've since I've been here, I think I've hit 34 of the 50 U.S. states.
Wow.
So with the aircraft, either helicopter or airplane. So we cross country flying is a normal part of our mission with hazmat material, and you have to plan. I mean, that's some strategic weather planning and mission planning that has to go with that when you're, taking off in Maryland and you're landing in on the West Coast during the same day. So there's a lot of planning that goes with that, and to look at the weather and then worry about deviations when you have surety material on board. What do you do if there's an incident? So you all that planning goes into consideration, and you can't really let your guard down until the technical escorts have left the airplane with the package. And then you can kind of take a deep sigh of relief that we made it and we've done the proper handoff.
Oh, wow. Now, you talk a lot about flying within the United States. Do you guys do any missions like overseas as like part of a deployment, or are you guys strictly just a CONUS unit?
We have the ability. Prior to my arrival, I believe the unit did some missions down in Central America. I think Panama comes to mind. Getting to Europe is a challenge with our airplane, but getting to Central America, Alaska, those are easier challenges to overcome than trying to go to Europe. So generally speaking, our missions are to the 48 states with the option of if we needed to get to Alaska. And Hawaii is out of our range right now.
Okay. France, were you going to say something?
Yeah, so specifically for the aviation side, the aircraft that we have are specifically identified for our surety missions. We use them for support requirements. The aviation section has supported our deployment down to Panama to destroy a chemical-filled munitions for World War II that was located down there. So that helped us and simplified our movement. We also do some training up in Canada. So we'd fly up to Canada with the 20th CBRNE Command teams that are doing some training there. But for CARA itself, we do a lot of deployments overseas. Our lab was deployed for 4 years supporting CENTCOM from FY 14 to 19 timeframe.
Oh, wow.
And that was a continuous, just like the soldiers rotating out, and that's our civilians rotating out on a regular basis. Then if we have to go overseas to respond as an organization for any, such as World War II chemical munitions, that has to all be coordinated through the State Department, DOD, before we deploy out. But We've gone to the Solomon Islands, we've gone to Korea, Panama, in order to respond to recovered chemical munitions or chemical material that were directly related to the U.S.
Okay, that's super fascinating. I did not know that like you guys actually deploy
It's a lot of
like
stuff.
a 4-year deployment. I mean, on a rotating basis, obviously, but 4 years is like a civilian constantly deploying in and out. That's wow, that's amazing.
That did cause some challenges. Again, the civilians aren't always ready for that because at least our chemists and microbiologists, most of them have not been in the military, so they're not quite used to that concept of rotations, deploying, I should say, or moving all the time. So that was a little bit of a challenge after the second, third year. That was before I arrived here, but we've talked about that.
So and now is it a little bit more accepting? How did the civilians react to that, being told, hey, you got to deploy? I'm assuming they're probably a year deployment or 6 months or something like that, kind of like the soldiers. Are they okay with that? Is that like an expectation that's given to them when they're hired and they know that going into it and they're okay with it now?
Yeah, that's a good question because all of our employees are emergency essentials. So they are they know when they come in that the potential for deployment, contingency ops, or doing a response outside the country is there. So we all of them have to maintain the same rigors as soldiers do for fitness and going through that whole process of annual physicals and getting recertified. And they're all aware of that. So I believe we were one of the few that almost everyone in this organization is emergency essential versus just a handful.
Okay, I gotcha. So we kind of talked about that. What kind of training? How do you train to do these types of things? I mean, it seems like, something chemical or biological or explosive, or even just flying a helicopter. I mean, obviously you know how to fly a helicopter, but to handle those surety missions and those things, like how do you train to do that in real world? Like, is there special things you guys do?
Well, on the aviation side, we train like we fight. So we try to simulate some of our training, even if it's just a routine training flight. We stick to the modes of flying instruments, flying in the clouds. If flying in the clouds is an option, we take it. If single pilot in the helicopter is an option, we will train for that also, because there may be a requirement where we're by ourselves, depending on what we're doing. We do aviation where we supply aviation assets when the surety officers do their simmer exercises. So quarterly, we will provide aviation assets for whether it be simulating a downed aircraft with surety material on board and watch the escorts do their mission. But it ties aviation in with their ground training and their emergency response drills that they do also. So it's good to see their part, and then the tech escorts get to see how we will handle an aviation incident or just routine flying from point A to point B.
Oh, wow. I think that's amazing. You guys thought of it all. Like, honestly, it seems like such a dangerous mission for sure.
So for the rest of the team, we leverage, just like Chris was talking about, the prior service. We do leverage the prior service because of all our unexploded ordnance specialists, the explosive safety specialists. They're all trained from the same school. So it could be from our civilians are from the Army, Air Force, Marine, and the Navy. We have them all. On the chemical engineer technicians, a lot of them are former chemical soldiers, or they were first responders who have learned how to deal with hazardous material, and that's what that background. Now, a lot of our remediation is actually working in a true environment versus just training. So when we go out and do a recovery, we can't say this is not a chemical round. We treat it as a chemical round until we get to that point for completing our assessment and having that adjudicated by other subject matter experts. So again, everything that we do, we treat as if it was real. And that keeps us well honed in our skills. So if we ever have to deploy in support of soldiers as a force multiplier, then our team is always ready to go.
Awesome. Guys, I have learned so much today. I feel like my brain's kind of like starting to explode a little bit with all of this information, but it is so very fascinating and interesting that there is a part of our Army and within FORSCOM that does something so cool and so unique. So I just want to say thank you for coming to talk to me today. Is there anything else you want to tell our listeners about CARA or 20th CBRNE? I mean, you can put in a recruiting plug if you want, but just is there anything else you want to tell our listeners?
So I would say that it is a privilege to work for CARA. We are a force multiplier. We're a very small but distinct organization that has a very specific focus. So even though we're small, we'll bring in a capability that could be used in contingency ops or emergency response, CONUS and OCONUS.
Chris, you got any last words for me?
Well, like you, 32 years in the Army, did not know this place existed until I applied for the job, and I'm very glad I did. I enjoy it up here. We do have a small rotation of pilots, and we announce routinely, so keep your eye out on USA Jobs because we could always use pilots.
Awesome. Well, I just want to say thank you guys so much for talking to me today and answering all my questions. Truly thankful and honestly super impressed.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So thank you, Franz and Christopher, for joining me today. And I just want to say, from 19 bases in 16 states, soldiers and U.S. Army civilians from the 20th CBRNE Command confront and defeat the world's most dangerous hazards in support of joint interagency and multinational operations. So from us to you, thank you for that. And we'll see you next time on the front line.